Hello everyone, Dolphin Oracle here tonight, and thought I would go over a little live USB system, antiX live system maintenance. So, like like most Linux distributions, you got to do things. You got to run your updates. You got to do that sort of thing. But when you're managing a live system, there's a few extra steps because the persistence files, the special files that store all the change that you make to the running live system, they fill up over time. So we need to have a couple things. One, we need to be able to get all of our updates into the persistence files. Okay, fine, we can do that. That's easy. That's just regular updater. That's what I got showing up here. This is our updater tool, and it's showing 155 new updates. I happen to know there's a kernel update in there. One of the things about the live system that's kind of different than a regular installed system is the kernel lives outside of that squash fs file, of that Linux fs file, of the persistence files for that matter, so that the system can boot it, and it chains in everything else. Which means if we have a kernel update, we got to be able to do an extra step to update the kernel that lives outside all of the file system that we're actually using. And we need a way to empty those special persistence files. I'm going to call it the persistence file rootfs. We need a way to empty those files, compress everything back into the default Linux FS or the default squash FS file. That's the Linux FS is where the system lives. We're going to put all that back together so that we can have more room for more updates and more applications in the future. I think I probably said a lot of that a little kooky, but maybe as we walk through, it'll help. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead. This system here is actually from a couple videos back. I did a frugal install on a Ubuntu installation, and this is actually that frugal system. Now, the things I'm going to talk about tonight are going to cover both frugal installs like that. It's going to cover an install on your live USB, anything that's running live using the live system. So I'm going to go ahead and run the updates because, quite frankly, that's going to be long and annoying. So I'm gonna pause here for a minute and let all that stuff happen. Okay. Oh my goodness, that was a lot of updates. And as things scroll by, I saw a lot of things. There was a LibreOffice, there was a kernel, there were a lot of base stuff, there was cups. I think the Debian 12.8 release was probably in this update someplace, plus a whole bunch of MX updates. So this was a really good thing to do now. So I'm going to close the updater window. And as you said, that persistence file's got a lot more information in it now. Because it's basically, instead of like copying over the files when we update it into like you would on normal installed system, all that stuff is sitting in the persistence file, which is in a layer on top. So you got the base system here that's read-only, then you got the persistence file with all the changes in it. So it sits on top in a layered file system. That's overlay FS. So let me open up the persistence control center here. There's a persistence button, and I think we can see how much of the file is used up right now. Now, if you remember, I made a fairly good size file, 12 gigabytes. I actually am not using all that much of it at the moment, 2.63 gigabytes. So that's good. I haven't filled it up doing that update. The update wasn't as big as I was afraid of. So let me cancel out of this. I don't need to do anything with that. Whoops, we need to cancel. I hit the wrong button. All right, so what we actually need to do now is I want to update the kernel that the live system uses. But first I'm going to do something called remaster. Now, if you've never done a remaster, what it's going to do is it's going to take all those changes that are in the root file, the rootfs file, and it's going to take it and the Linux FS file, which is the default read-only file system, and it's going to smash them together and merge them together, and so you're going to get a new default Linux FS file with all the changes in it. So your read-only file system will have all the changes in it, and the rootfs file then will be removed, and you can have a new one that's ready to go for future use. So I'm going to there's a lot of ways to do this. I'm just going to click the remaster button in our remaster control center. You can type live-kernel-updater remaster in the command line, it'll help with that. If you run the live kernel updater tool, which we're going to do after the remaster is done, and you haven't done a remaster, it'll just tell you to do one and help you out with running it there too. So there's a lot of ways to do this. We're not going to let you update the live system in a way, well, we're going to try not to let you update the live system in a way that makes it unbootable, and we're certainly going to try to take care of your data. So I need a password here for the remaster. I'm going to do a general remaster. Now you can do a personal remaster, which will take all the settings you have, your user accounts and everything, and dump that into your into the LinuxFS file system as well. This is kind of a generic one, so I'll just let it reset up when it comes back again. Do I want to save files under /home in the new master? I'm not going to do that. You can, and all those files will be there, and they'll be part of the layered file system. I'm pretty sure when I set this up before that I set up with a home persistence file, so I'm just gonna, you know what, we can check that. Let me get out of here and check that configure. Let's see here, persistence. Here we go. We'll check and see how I set it up. I have a persistence device, rootfs. I do have a home FS system, so my home FS will remain. I'm not going to screw around with the home folder. Okay, remaster. There we go, back to this. So general, fine. Do I want to save? No, I don't. I'll leave it in the home FS file. That home persistence file is not going to change. It's going to remain outside. It is not going to be compressed back into the Linux FS file. And it's going to do its thing. Now it's going to ask me how to do it. I'm going to use ZTSD. LZ4 is very, very fast, but there's not enough space on my disk right now to use that because it's a virtual box installed with the Frugal, if you remember right, and I honestly made my persistence file too big. So we'll stick with ZTSD. You want to remaster there with CPUs? Yes, because they melt it. I don't care. And we're going to hit OK. And now it's doing that. This process here, it won't take too long on a reasonably fast system. It actually doesn't take that long on a slow system, as long as your disk UI is pretty quick. It can take properly forever on a slow system on a USB stick. So just be patient, let it run. Don't touch the computer because it's trying to sync up changes. Go get a cup of coffee, go make a sandwich, come back to it later, and it will eventually be done. Now, there may be times when it looks like it's frozen because the progress bar doesn't actually update all that often. The I/O going on in this is kind of heavy. So we're going to let this thing go and then come back in a minute. Okay, we're back. It's done. You can see it took about 8.5 minutes or so doing that. And you can see here that, okay, the new file should be used automatically the next time you boot. Now that's this linuxfs.new file. That's the old linuxfs crammed together with the rootfs file, the persistence file, smashed all together to make a new base system, basically. Okay, and if it's all going wrong, the old one file has been saved, and you can use a rollback boot option to go backwards. And quite frankly, you can just sort of rename the files too, but the rollback's convenient. So I'm okay here. We're done with this. Now we got one more step. Now we've compressed all things together, but we haven't updated the kernel yet. Remember, the kernel updated during that big update from Debian. We got a new kernel. We got a 6.1 point. We got a 6.1.27 or 0.27. I forget how they named the kernel, but anyway, they got a new kernel in there. We went from 25 to 27. So we're going to update the kernel now. And there is a tool for that because, again, it's not like a regular system. So we have the live USB kernel updater tool. The kernel updater tool, again, one of those antiX live system tools that make the antiX live system so flexible, so easy to use, so easy to maintain. So we're going to put in my password, except I think I just put my password in wrong. There we go. And so it's going to ask us, okay, what system do we want to update? It's going to tell us the current running kernel. Now that's this 6.1.0-25. There we go, -25. That's the current one that the ISO that I started with shipped with. And so it's going to find the current live system on SDA2. That's where my Frugal install is located. So okay. And it's going to find all of the various kernels. Now, It's going to try to find some other things, some memtest stuff. Some of these things may or may not work depending on how you're set up, but whatever. We don't care about the memtest. All we care about is updating what's called the VM Linux, but with a Z instead of an X. I don't know why, but that's what it is. We're going to update that file, and it's going to be slightly confusing. It's going to say we got one live kernel, that's our current kernel, one default live kernel, that's the same kernel, and we've got one new kernel, the 6.1.0-27. Now that's the one that's the current Debian 12.8. So we're going to update the VM Linux file, and it's going to ask us which one to do. And it's going to sound weird because it's going to say the old kernel. Update VM Linux from 6.1.0-25. That's the one we want. And now it's going to ask us which kernel do we want. Now, for whatever reason, probably because of the way memtesters work, this thing picks up memtest as a kernel. Don't pick memtest. Just pick the kernel. And now it's going to tell you exactly what it's going to do. And it's going to update the 25 kernel in the old file. It's going to rename that file kold, so that's, again, we don't get rid of anything. And then it's going to change, it's going to make the 27 version of that kernel the new default VM Linux file. Okay, shall we begin? Yes. And this is going to take like no time at all. Okay, it's done. It's done. Because all I did was copy 2 files. That's all I had to do. So we hit enter. And now that's done. Now, so we're going to do the reboot into what's essentially a new live system. Okay, back up and running here on the Frugal install. Now this should have the new kernel. Search for boot device, found boot device. So we're booting up, we're just fine. Okay, now it's found a rootfs file. It's a root persistence request, but no rootfs file. Remember, that file, we saved it, we got rid of it, we crammed it back into the Linux SF file. It's asking if we want to make another one. And wasn't real good with doing my file sizes earlier, but I'm just going to accept the default 3 gig because that's fine. We can resize it later if we want to. And because I didn't save all my settings in there, it's asking to set up the password again, which is fine. I'm going to do that. And now we're already running already. So we'll check the kernel, and that is the 2.7 kernel, which is great because if we had updated it in the just the persistence file and booted, it would still read 25, even though 27 was the latest kernel. Unless you do the live-kernel-updater tool part, that kernel won't actually be used because it's wasn't available to the actual bootloader because that kernel it was living inside the Linux FS file or the persistence file, I guess. So at any rate, so that is done. The persistence file is done. Now, if we're happy with those files, we're going to go back to the remaster control center here. If we're happy with those files, with our current configuration, and we can get rid of the old ones to free up some space. So we have this persistence tool here from there, and we can do a bunch of different options here. We can fix, delete, or broken or outdated files. We can change the persistence device. So all sorts of things we can do here. We can resize the persistence files. I think you can't be using them at the time when you resize them. I could be wrong. I haven't tried that one in a while. You can make a new rootfs file. I'm going to delete the old ones here. Let's see here. Fix. And we'll hit OK. And it's going to tell you all the things that it can do to fix. It's found the old rootfs file. It's found the old Linux SF file. We can quit the program or we can stop doing this action. I'm going to get rid of these things because I don't need them anymore. And that's it. And then we can resize the root persistence. Yep, can't resize it while it's mounted. That's what I thought. But if we wanted to resize those persistence files, then we could mount without any persistence going at all and retool that file and then reboot with the persistence enabled, and you would have it that way. So that is maintaining your live system. No matter how you operate it, whether statically off the USB stick, loaded into RAM, frugal, or on a live USB, there's a couple things you need to do, especially when you run updates. You need to keep an eye on the file space on that rootfs file, the persistence file. And when it gets too full, or essentially after a big update, is when I do it, You compress all that back down into the Linux FS file with the remaster tool. And if you had any kernel updates, you use live-kernel-updater tool to update that. The biggest part of this was the remaster. It took about 8 minutes. The kernel updater tool I did live, it took seconds. So it doesn't take that long to do. And you get all the benefits of the live system, running off a USB stick, using the 2 RAM, the fact that the file system is really in the Linux FS file is essentially immutable. It's read-only. If you wanted to reset the system, you just delete the rootfs file, and you got the you still have an operable disk, an operable system. Sorry about the gobbledygook. I hope you enjoyed the video. For tips, tricks, how-tos, head over to mxlinux.org or throw up a post at forum.mxlinux.org. This is Dolphin Oracle signing off. Have a great night.